What if the dead could talk? Not metaphorically, not in legends or ghost stories. What if the things we buried thousands of years ago, the bodies, the artifacts, the sealed chambers, were actually trying to tell us something? Something we weren't ready to hear? Because here's the truth about archaeology that nobody tells you in school. The most important discoveries in human history didn't come from libraries. They didn't come from scrolls or tablets or ancient texts. They came from graves. And not just any graves. The 10 we're about to explore tonight were sealed for a reason, hidden deliberately. Some were booby-trapped. Some were buried under entire mountains of dirt. Some were submerged underwater for 3,000 years. Every single one of them was meant to stay secret forever. None of them did. I'm going to warn you right now. Some of what these graves revealed is deeply unsettling. Not just historically, not just archaeologically. Unsettling in the way that makes you question what human beings are actually capable of. If you're ready for that, let's open the first one. Grave 1. The Tomb of the Golden Man, Kazakhstan, 400 BCE. We start not in Egypt, not in Rome, but in the vast steppes of Kazakhstan, in a burial mound called a kurgan, where in 1969 a Soviet archaeologist named Kamal Akishev made a discovery that stopped him cold. Inside a wooden burial chamber, lie on a wooden platform, was a young man. He couldn't have been older than 18, and he was covered head to toe in gold. 4,000 individual gold pieces had been sewn onto his clothing. A pointed headdress nearly 3 feet tall, decorated with golden snow leopards and horses and mountain goats, rose from his skull. His boots were covered in golden plaques. His weapons were sheathed in golden handles. This was the Scythian Golden Man, and he appended everything historians thought they knew about the nomadic peoples of Central Asia. The Scythians were supposed to be wandering barbarians, uncivilized, primitive, people who moved constantly across the steppes without cities, without writing, without the refinements of settled civilization. But you do not bury someone in 4,000 handcrafted golden pieces. If you are primitive, the craftsmanship is extraordinary. Each golden animal figure is posed in a distinctive Scythian animal style, muscles tensed, limbs curled, every piece expressing a ferocious, coiled energy. Modern jewelers who have examined them say the techniques used were sophisticated enough to challenge craftsmen working today. The headdress alone took researchers months to fully catalog. And then there's the question of who he was. He was young. Too young, most researchers agree, to have earned this burial through a lifetime of achievement. Some believe he was a prince. Others suggest he may have been a ritual figure, a sacred king whose death was itself a religious act. The golden suit was not decoration. It was armor for the afterlife. Each animal represented a spiritual force, protection against what waited on the other side. The Scythians left no written records. This young man cannot tell us his name. He cannot tell us what he feared. But 4,000 golden pieces, sewn with extraordinary care onto a teenage body in a sealed mound in the middle of nowhere, tells us something profound. They believed, deeply, completely, and at extraordinary cost, they believed. Grave 2, the pit graves of Iraq, 2,600 BC. Now we travel to ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. The city of Ur, one of the oldest cities on Earth, home to the Sumerians, the civilization that invented writing, the wheel, and the concept of law. In the 1920s, British archaeologist Leonard Woolley was excavating the Royal Cemetery of Ur when he opened a burial shaft and found something that made him put down his tools and sit in silence for a long time. Inside the shaft, which he called a Great Death Pit, were the remains of 74 people, 6 men, 68 women, all of them arranged in neat, orderly rows, all of them dressed in their finest clothes, all of them wearing their best jewelry. The women wore elaborate golden headdresses. Some still had golden lyres near their hands. There was no sign of violence, no evidence of struggle. They had walked in, lain down, and died. Toxicological analysis conducted centuries later on the skeletal remains suggests they were poisoned, most likely a sedative or narcotic administered in a drink. The current leading theory is that they consumed it willingly, as part of a ritual send-off for a king or queen whose identity we still haven't confirmed. They were the royal court, the musicians, the guards, the attendants. And when their ruler died, they followed, Not because they were forced, because they chose to. That is the detail that haunts everyone who studies the site. Not the death itself, but the willingness, the orderly rows, the careful arrangement of bodies, the fact that someone took the time to position each person's hands, to straighten each headdress, to make sure everyone looked their best for whatever came next. Woolley found 16 royal graves at UR. 6 of them contained mass burials like this. 74 people in one pit, dozens more in the others. We know their bones. We know their jewelry. We know roughly how they died. We will never know what they believe was waiting for them on the other side. That made them willing to go. Grave 3, the Lady of Chao, Peru, 400 CE. For decades, archaeologists assumed that the powerful rulers of the Moat civilization on Peru's northern coast were men, the warrior priest depicted in Moat art, performing ritual combat, presiding over sacrifices, wearing elaborate headdresses and golden armor, were always shown as male figures. Then in 2006, a team excavating a burial mound called Wakit Chao Viejo found a tomb that had never been opened. Inside was a woman, not a queen consort, not a secondary figure, a ruler. She was buried with the full regalia of most political and military power, war clubs, spear throwers, shields. 2 sacrificed young men lay beside her. Her body was wrapped in hundreds of pounds of gold and copper ornaments. Tattoos of spiders and serpents, symbols of power and supernatural authority, were still visible on her preserved skin. She has been named the Lady of Chao, and she is the oldest known female ruler in the ancient Americas. Her existence demolished a century of assumptions about most society. If a woman held supreme military and religious authority in 400 CE in pre-Columbian Peru, what else had scholars gotten wrong? How many other female rulers have been misidentified, overlooked, or assumed to be male because of the objects buried with them? The answer, it turned out, was several. Since the Lady of Chao's discovery, researchers have gone back to previously excavated sites and found evidence of female political power that had been systematically misread. She was not an exception. She was evidence of a pattern that had been invisible because no one was looking for it. Her tomb had been sealed for 1,600 years. It took that long for us to be ready to understand what she was telling us. Grave 4, Tomb 10A, Deri el Bersha, Egypt, 2000 BC. Egypt, the Middle Kingdom period. A provincial governor named Jehudinak has just died, and his family has buried him and his wife in an elaborate rock-cut tomb in the cliffs above the Nile. The tomb was robbed in antiquity. The mummies were vandalized. The governor's head was separated from his body by ancient grave robbers looking for the amulets placed beneath the wrappings. When a Harvard expedition rediscovered the tomb in 1915, they found the wreckage and packed everything up, including a wooden head that had rolled away from a damaged coffin, and shipped it all to Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, where it sat, largely unstudied, for nearly a century. In 2009, museum researchers decided to run DNA analysis on the wooden head, not on a mummy, on the painted wooden face of a coffin, to see if ancient DNA had survived in the paint or wood. It had, and the DNA they extracted from a 2,000-year-old painted wooden face wasn't just readable. It was detailed enough to identify the specific individual. But the discovery that stopped the scientific community wasn't the DNA. It was what the CT scans of the coffin revealed about the craftsmanship. The coffin of Jehudinak is painted with what are called the coffin texts, the most extensive collection of ancient Egyptian religious spells ever found on a single object. Over 200 individual spells, painted in microscopic hieroglyphics in multiple colors on every interior surface of the wooden box. The level of detail is so fine that modern researchers needed digital microscopy to read portions of it. Who painted this? How long did it take? What did it mean to the craftsman who spent months or years covering every inch of coffin's interior with spells that the dead man, and only the dead man, would ever see? The coffin was made for an audience of one, a dead one. That level of devotion to a single individual's afterlife journey, the care, the cost, the artistry, all of it invisible to the living world, says something about what the ancient Egyptians believed about death that no historical text has ever quite captured. Grave 5, the Varna Necropolis, Bulgaria, 4500 BCE. This one will reset your entire understanding of when human inequality began. The year is 1972. A Bulgarian construction worker named Rachel Marinov is digging a drainage ditch near the city of Varna on the Black Sea coast when his excavator hits something. He has just discovered the oldest known burial site in the world to contain gold artifacts, not just gold artifacts. The largest concentration of gold ever found from the prehistoric period, from 6,500 years ago, nearly 1,500 years before the Egyptian pyramids were built. The Varna necropolis contains 294 graves, but the gold is not evenly distributed. Most graves contain a few modest objects, copper tools, clay vessels, simple ornaments. But grave 43 contains more gold than all the other graves in the entire cemetery combined. The person buried in grave 43 wore a golden penis sheath, a golden breastplate, golden arm rings, a golden bow and arrows, golden ornaments covering every part of the body. The skeleton in grave 43 belonged to a man between 40 and 50 years old. He was tall for his era. His teeth showed no signs of nutritional deficiency throughout his entire life, meaning he never went hungry, not even as a child. His bones showed no signs of heavy physical labor, meaning he never worked the way most people in his society did. From birth to death, this man lived differently from everyone around him. 6,500 years ago, before Egypt, before Mesopotamia's great cities, before writing, before any civilization that history textbooks recognize. Someone was already at the top. Someone was already at the bottom. The hierarchy we live with today, the gap between the person who never goes hungry and the person who does, is not a product of civilization. It predates it. Grave 43 tells us that human inequality is not a bug in the system. It may be the original feature. Grave 6, the frozen tombs of Pazyryk, Siberia, 300 BCE. High in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, in the permafrost above the Trilene, the Pazyryk people buried their dead in log chambers sealed beneath stone mounds. The freezing temperatures did something no embalmer could replicate. They preserved everything. When Soviet archaeologists opened these tombs beginning in the 1920s, they found not just bones, but skin, clothing, hair, internal organs, food, wooden furniture, felt wall hangings with intricate designs, a Persian carpet that is the oldest known knotted pile carpet in the world, still with its colors intact after 2,300 years, and tattoos. The Pazyryk tattooed their bodies extensively. The designs, recovered from the preserved skin of multiple individuals, show extraordinary artistic complexity. Deer with elaborate antlers, griffins, mythological creatures combining features of multiple animals. The tattoos wrap around shoulders, spiral down arms, cover the entire back. One woman, believed to be a shaman or spiritual leader based on her burial goods, was found with tattoos covering both arms from shoulder to wrist in an unbroken narrative of mythological imagery. She had been dead for 2,500 years. Her skin still told her story. But the frozen tombs revealed something else, something darker. Several of the high-status individuals showed evidence of significant head trauma, injuries that had been sustained and survived, sometimes repeatedly. One man had been scalped. Another showed evidence of multiple skull fractures at different stages of healing, meaning he had survived serious head injuries multiple times before his final death. These were not peaceful people. The frozen preservation that gives us their tattoos and their carpets also gives us their wounds. The beauty and the violence, preserved together in the permafrost, exactly as they lived. Grave 7. The Terracotta Army's hidden secret, China, 210 BCE. You know about the Terracotta Army. 8,000 clay soldiers buried with China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, to protect him in the afterlife. But here is what most people don't know. The emperor's actual tomb has never been opened. It sits beneath a man-made mountain, a burial mound roughly the size of a small city, 1 mile from the Terracotta Army pits. Chinese archaeologists have surveyed extensively using ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive technologies. What they found is staggering. The burial chamber itself is enormous, larger than many cathedrals. The mercury levels in the soil above the tomb are extraordinarily high, far above natural background levels, consistent with the ancient historical accounts that describe rivers of liquid mercury flowing through the underground palace, representing the rivers and seas of China. The ancient historian Sima Qian, writing a century after the tomb was sealed, described a vast underground kingdom, complete with palaces, officials, rare treasures, and mechanical crossbows designed to automatically fire anyone who entered. Modern surveys suggest the tomb has not been significantly disturbed. The mercury levels indicate the underground chambers are likely still intact. 8,000 soldiers stand guard above. Inside, according to every measurement science has been able to take without opening it, a world has been waiting for 2,200 years. The Chinese government has decided, for now, not to open it. The technology preserved with inside, organic materials, textile, wood, does not yet exist at the scale required. The most significant unopened tomb in human history is sitting right there, and we are choosing not to look. Grave 8, Cahokia Mound 72, Illinois, USA 1000 C. This one is on American soil, and it is one of the most disturbing discoveries in North American archaeology. Cahokia was the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico, located near modern-day St. Louis, Illinois. At its peak around 1100 CE, it had a population of 10 to 20,000 people, larger than London at the same time. In 1967, archaeologists excavated a burial mound called Mound 72. What they found has been debated, studied, and quietly disturbing researchers ever since. The central burial was a man laid on a platform of 20,000 marine shell beads arranged in the shape of a falcon, a symbol of the most powerful spiritual forces in Mississippian culture. He was surrounded by offerings of extraordinary wealth, but around him, in mass graves, were the remains of hundreds of other people. 270 individuals, mostly young women between the ages of 15 and 25, buried in mass graves in groups that show evidence of simultaneous death. The working theory among most archaeologists is ritual sacrifice, carried out in multiple separate events over the history of the mound, each one coinciding with a new burial or significant ritual moment. But here is the detail that makes Mound 72 so deeply unsettling. The young women were not random. The isotope analysis of their bones shows that many of them came from different geographic regions, meaning they were brought to Cahokia specifically for this purpose. They were not local people caught up in a moment of ritual violence. They were gathered, transported, and deliberately chosen. Someone organized this. Someone had the authority to reach across hundreds of miles of North American landscape and collect these young women. Someone decided multiple times, over multiple decades, that this was necessary. That level of organizational power in a city most Americans have never heard of, in a civilization that is rarely taught in schools, right here in the American Midwest, is one of the most significant and least discussed facts in American history. Grave 9, the Antikythera tomb, Greece, 65 BCE. In 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers were sheltering from a storm off the island of Antikythera when one of them dove to check the anchor and found himself standing in the middle of an ancient shipwreck. The wreck was Roman era, dating to around 65 BC. It contained statues, coins, glassware, and jewelry, a treasure haul that kept archaeologists busy for years. But the object that changed history was a lump of corroded bronze about the size of a shoebox. Nobody paid it much attention for decades. It sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, slowly drying out. Then in 1951, a historian named Derek de Sola Price got a close look at it and realized it wasn't a lump of corroded bronze. It was a machine. The Antikythera mechanism, as it came to be known, is the oldest known analog computer in the world. Using a system of at least 30 gears, it could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and 5 planets known to the ancient Greeks. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses, accurate to within hours, decades in advance. It tracked the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. It modeled the irregular orbit of the moon using a pin and slot mechanism that represents the first known application of differential gearing in human history. This technology was not rediscovered in the Western world until the 14th century CE, 1,400 years later. The mechanism was on a ship. It was cargo, being transported somewhere, presumably for someone wealthy enough to commission it and knowledgeable enough to use it. The ship sank. The mechanism was buried under the sea for 2,000 years. We do not know who made it. We do not know who ordered it. We do not know how many others existed and were lost, melted down, or simply corroded into unrecognizable lumps in other ancient shipwrecks we haven't found yet. What we know is that someone, 2,000 years ago, understood the solar system well enough to build a mechanical model of it in a box you could carry under your arm, and that knowledge disappeared so completely that it took 14 centuries to rediscover. What else disappeared? What else is sitting at the bottom of the Mediterranean or the bottom of some collection somewhere, waiting for someone to look closely enough? Grave 10, the Thornborough Hengest, England, 3,500 BCE. Our final stop is England, not Stonehenge, somewhere older and stranger and far less famous. In North Yorkshire, 3 enormous circular earthwork monuments stand in a line, each about a mile apart, each nearly 1,000 feet in diameter. They are called the Thornborough Hengest, and they are among the largest prehistoric monuments in Britain. They were built around 3,500 BC, predating Stonehenge by roughly 500 years. And they are precisely aligned with the 3 stars of Orion's belt. Not approximately, not suggestively. The alignment, when measured against the position of Orion's belt as it rose on the southern horizon in 3,500 BCE, is exact. The builders coated the outer banks of the Hengest with gypsum, a brilliant white mineral that would have made the monuments gleam in sunlight and moonlight alike, visible for miles across the Yorkshire landscape. Thousands of people would have been required to build them. The organization, the planning, the astronomical knowledge required to align 3 massive earthworks with 3 specific stars thousands of years before any known civilization is supposed to have possessed that kind of precision suggests something that British archaeologists are still very carefully trying to explain. Burials have been found within and around the Hengest, evidence that they served a funerary purpose, that the dead were brought here deliberately to lie beneath the gaze of Orion's belt. Why Orion? In ancient Egypt, which would not exist for another 500 years, Orion represented Osiris, the god of the dead, the ruler of the underworld. Did the people of Neolithic Yorkshire share that belief? Did they independently arrive at the same spiritual meaning for the same constellation? Or does the parallel suggest something even more unsettling? A shared cosmological tradition spreading across prehistoric Europe and North Africa that we have barely begun to understand? The Hengests are still there, still aligned, still gleaming white where the gypsum has been restored, still waiting for an explanation that satisfies. Conclusion: 10 graves, 10 sealed chambers, 10 secrets that were never meant to see the light. A teenage Scythian warrior covered in 4,000 pieces of gold. 74 people who walked willingly into a death pit in ancient UR. A female warrior queen in Peru whose existence rewrote the history of power in the ancient Americas. An Egyptian coffin painted with invisible spells for a dead man's eyes only. The oldest gold in the world, buried with a single man in Bulgaria 6,500 years ago, proving inequality predates civilization itself. A Siberian shaman tattooed from shoulder to wrist, perfectly preserved in permafrost with her wounds and her art intact. China's first emperor lying undisturbed beneath a mountain of mercury and silence. 270 young women brought from across North America for a ritual in a city most Americans have never heard of. An ancient computer sitting at the bottom of the sea for 2,000 years, representing technology that wouldn't be reinvented for 14 centuries. And 3 gleaming white circles in Yorkshire, aligned to the stars of Orion 50 centuries ago, for reasons we still cannot fully explain. These graves were sealed, deliberately, permanently. They were not meant to be opened, but graves have a way of talking eventually. The things we bury have a way of surfacing, and what surfaces is never exactly what we expected. History is not a story we have finished writing. It is a story that keeps being revised every time someone digs in the right place at the right time. The graves are still out there. The secrets are still inside them. And somewhere, right now, someone is digging